Okay, so this would be lesson 9 for the IELTS speaking. Today we're going to do a practice test. So once again, hello. This is Gawain, or you could call me Jason. Today we'll go through the entire speaking section. We'll go through it once, almost like you're taking the test. We're going to do part 1, part 2, and part 3. It'll probably be a little longer than the normal test. I recommend that you pause it at times and try to do it on your own as we're going through it. Your answers will probably be different than mine. I could only just give you examples. So we'll do part 1, part 2, part 3. What do you remember about answering part 1? Okay, as we're doing this, pretend you're taking the test. When you go in, you're going to meet the examiner. He'll ask you a few questions. He'll probably say, "How are you?" You'll say, "Fine, I'm doing great," or or something similar. Remember, the test hasn't started. You don't need to speak 4 or 5 sentences here. They'll confirm your name, and then he'll ask, "What would you like to be called?" That's often because Chinese students might have an English name. You'll show your ID. As soon as you show your ID and he looks at it or she, the test is going to begin. Okay, I put these up here. For now, I'm not going to read them because I'll read them to you as we go through them. I just put these some part ones up for now. These are the ones we're going to do if you want to look back through later. Keep in mind, they're not going to show you the questions for part one. They'll just ask you. I'm doing it so you can go through and practice on your own later. Um, excuse me. Please feel free to pause the lesson and prepare each answer. Prepare for each question. When you take the test, you're not going to be given time to to think about it when you're doing when you're doing part one. You'll be given a minute for part two, but not for part one. All my answers here are just kind of my answers. They're not always exactly what I think. I just came up with these answers. You could always kind of use them as a format and then go through and make it your own, right? So for example, if I say wolves are my favorite animals, you could say something else, right? You could say porcupines or dolphins, whatever your favorite animal is. You kind of can just use this as a format if you get this question. So, what's your favorite animal? I've always loved animals. Sure, I know that some of them can be dangerous to people and you can't get close to them, but I've always had an appreciation of animals. I guess that wolves would be my favorite animal. You cannot have them as a pet because they are dangerous, yet I think they are beautiful creatures. I enjoy watching documentaries on wolves. Next one, what is the most popular animal in China? There are many animals that are native to China, but if I had to guess, I would say that pandas are the most popular animal in China. All around the world, China is known for having pandas. There is a certain amount of pride that some Chinese people have for what may be considered their national animal. I think the pandas are cute and I respect them because they are endangered. And remember, your answers might vary for all these, right? These are just standard answers I've given. Some of them are not even true for me. I'm sometimes trying to just think how a student might answer these. Have you ever had a pet before? No, I have never had a pet before. My mother does not like pets, and as I think that she is afraid of them, or else she thinks that they are dirty and she doesn't want to clean up after them. I think that once I have settled in my own place after I get a good career, I would like to have a dog. They are loyal, and I've always wanted a pet. Some of these questions aren't great. Here's one I think isn't such a great question, but you might get asked something like this. Where do you prefer to keep your pet, indoors or outdoors? As I said before, I would like to have a dog someday. If I live out in a rural area, I might keep my dog out during the day but let him in at night. However, I will most likely live in the city when I'm older, and I will maybe only have a balcony outside, so my dog will live indoors. Of course, I will take him on walks so that he can relieve himself and get exercise. So these are just examples. You could answer these a lot of different ways. I didn't come up for every possible answer for every question. And we've got some more questions here about headphones, right? Those first four probably aren't quite enough for part one. It's going to be 4 to 5 minutes. So they might ask you some more in a different section. They also might ask you one or two from each section. We're just doing 2 sections today for part one. So the first question here, do you use headphones? Yes, I do use headphones. I think that most people who live in large urban areas use headphones, or at least most younger people do. If you want to listen to music in an area with many people around, it is very rude to force everyone else around you to listen to your music. So, the polite thing to do is to use headphones. What type of headphones do you use? I think the most commonly used type of headphones are earbuds. I know that when I use them, and most of my friends use them as well. Mine are not the most expensive type of headphones, not even the most expensive type of earbuds, but they work well enough. Mine are also wireless, so they are more convenient to use, but they need to be charged. When would you use headphones? I use headphones most of the time. As I stated previously, it is rude to be around other people and not use headphones. I use headphones on the subway, in restaurants, and anytime I am in public. Because I have roommates, I also use headphones at home. It's also nice to use them to cancel out other noises such as traffic or construction. In what conditions wouldn't you use headphones? Although I use headphones most of the time, I actually prefer to not use them. If I am at home alone, I don't use them. I will use them when watching a movie on my computer or phone if other people are around. But if I am by myself, I don't use them. I also watch movies with my roommates, and of course, if others are watching too, I don't use them. Okay, so those 8 questions should take up to 4 to 5 minutes. Remember, we're answering 4 to 5 sentences for part one, so probably won't have more than 8. You could have up to 12 if you have some of your answers that are a little light. But to try to do 4 to 5, and you shouldn't have all 12 questions if you do 4 to 5 sentences. Okay, let's move on to part two. Okay, so they will give you paper with part two on it. We'll look at the part three. We won't worry about the part three for right now. Part two, describe an exciting book that you enjoy reading. You should say when you read it, what kind of book it is, what it is about, and explain why you think it is exciting. So remember, you'll have 1 minute to prepare to answer this. Use your time to the best of your ability. Have your interrogatives memorized: who, what, where, why, when, how. Remember your senses: sight, hearing, smell, taste, and tactile. Think of emotions and perhaps a story. Take at least 1 minute to prepare your answer. Well, you'll only have 1 minute, really. Your answer, of course, will most likely be different than mine. I'm just giving you examples here. I can't answer these for you, right? You're going to come up with your own experiences or your own whatever you think of for this stuff. Okay, so let's get into this answer. The answer's too long, but that's fine. It's better to have them cut you off than to not speak for long enough. All right, the question: describe an exciting book that you enjoy reading. The answer begins: I like to read quite a bit. There are many books that I enjoy, such as A Song of Ice and Fire series, the Expanse series, and anything that Stephen King writes. However, I suppose my favorite book is The Fellowship of the Ring, part of the Lord of the Rings series. The entire series is good, but The Fellowship of the Ring, being the first book, has always been my favorite. I suppose that is because my favorite character, Boromir, is only in that particular book. It's a high fantasy and adventure book with strong themes of good and evil, like much fantasy. Still on the same answer here for an exciting book. I have only read it maybe 4 or 5 times. Every few years, I reread all 3 books. I also enjoy the films made by Peter Jackson that were based on J.R.R. Tolkien's books. Christopher Lee, the actor that plays Saruman, famously stated that he read the books every year, but I don't read them that often. Why do I like it? It's epic fantasy. There are a whole host of characters that are all well developed and quite intriguing. It is adventurous, but not lighthearted. There are serious consequences if our heroes fail, as the world will be thrown into darkness and the Dark Lord Sauron will destroy the world of men. I also like the fantasy elements and the other humanoid creatures like hobbits, elves, dwarves, orcs, ents, and wizards. And we're continuing again with exciting book. The plot is far too complicated to get into great detail to explain in such a short time. Basically, Frodo Baggins, a hobbit, sets out to destroy an evil ring that he received from his uncle. The power of the ring is bringing back Sauron, and unless the ring is destroyed, Sauron will conquer it all. Along the way, Frodo meets many other characters that help him out. Most of these characters end up separating from Frodo and go on to fight evil in other ways and at other places in the world of Middle-earth. The story is long and quite complicated, and the setting is rich with its own history. I remember when I was a child, my father got me into all of Tolkien's books, and The Fellowship of the Ring has always been my favorite, even though it really only tells 1/3 of the whole story. Okay, that should all be plenty for part 2. Oh, that was probably more than 2 minutes. You will probably get cut off before finishing. That's okay. It's better to get cut off, like I said, than to not have enough to say. Remember, you're only going to have 1 minute to prepare. And another hint here, think of a book that had a film made about it when you're practicing. Because you might be asked about a film or you might be asked about a book. And you could answer the same. Just remember, sometimes they change the name. An example would be Blade Runner, the movie. The book was called Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep? Or the movie The Shawshank Redemption was based on a novella called Rita Hayworth and the Shawshank Redemption. So just remember, if you're preparing that way, to know the name of both the book and the movie if it's different. But you can answer them both in a film or movie question, right? I talked a tiny bit about the movies from The Lord of the Rings. All right, let's look at part 3. Okay, so part 3, you saw some of the questions earlier. We're going to do those and then one extra. All right, do you prefer books or movies? Myself, I much prefer books to movies. However, just about everyone else I know doesn't read very much and seems to prefer movies to books. I do enjoy movies, but I just think that books are better. Movies take much less time out of one's life and they require less work to get through. Still, I am of the opinion that books are far superior, as they allow us to get inside the minds of the characters and understand their motivations much better as we really get familiar with them, much more than we can by watching a movie. Right, so these part 3 should be 5 to 6 sentences, a little longer than your part 1 answers. They're a bit longer. And you're still speaking for 4 to 5 minutes here, so you should have less part 3 questions than you do have part 1 questions. Next, part 3 question. Do you think it is very important to read the book before watching the movie version of it? So the answer, as I already said, most of my friends don't read very much and seem to enjoy movies well enough without ever having read the book. I know many people might say it is better to read the book first, but I disagree with that assessment. I have found that I am often disappointed with a movie if I have read the book first, because the book is almost always better. If I watch the movie first, I learn about the world and the story as I'm watching it, and it makes a far better experience. If I read the book first, then I'm always comparing it to the movie, and it can ruin the fun. If a movie is intriguing, then I will read the book it was based on after watching the film. Do boys and girls like the same kind of books? I believe this is another dumb question. So, that's fine. A dumb question. Do boys and girls like the same kind of books? It's difficult to generalize, and I don't like to speak for all males or all females. In addition, as I have said, most of my friends don't read books and only watch movies, so I can't answer this based on personal experience, and I'll have to rate it more on the types of movies that people enjoy. This is just a stereotype and doesn't include everybody, but it seems that more men or boys like action movies and more women or girls like romance. This doesn't include everyone, as many girls that I know also like action movies, but I know very few boys who like romance. Other genres, like comedies or horror, tend to attract both men and women. So, next question. What kinds of books do Chinese people like reading? Now, I don't like questions like these last two that generalize or stereotype people. I don't know why they put them in IELTS, but they do. They tend to do it more in part three than part one or two. But just answer to the best of your ability. That is very much a generalization that I think would be unfounded to answer, to say an entire group likes this or that, especially in something so diverse and limitless as books, is something I cannot answer. And once again, I know many more movie watchers than I know book readers, so I'll have to answer based on my knowledge of that. I would say that, based on ticket sales, Chinese people like Marvel movies or superhero movies in general, but the same can be said for many other countries as well. Big budget action seems to make much more money than other types of films, not just in China, but everywhere. Okay, that should be enough for part three. Our answers were pretty long, but they might ask you another question if there's not enough time. Also, they might ask you questions, for example, if some of the part three questions they were going to answer, you answered in part two, then they might change it and ask you some different questions. So we'll pretend that you have one more question for this. And it's not one that was on that we looked at earlier. It's one they might just add off the top of their head, just in case you haven't filled up the time. So we'll just pretend that this is another question that they asked you off the top of their head that it wasn't on the sheet. What is your favorite genre of books? I like many different genres of books, such as mystery, horror, and war. You might guess that my favorite genre of literature is fantasy, based on my favorite novel, but you would be wrong. Sure, my favorite book, The Fellowship of the Ring, is fantasy, but my favorite genre is science fiction. There are so many science fiction books that I have read and loved. I find it so interesting to get into the author's imagination about the technology that might exist in the future or in another part of the universe. But the thing I think that makes it great is the characters. It's not just the technology, but how people behave around the technology that makes sci-fi very fascinating for me. Okay, so we don't have a lot to review today because we really didn't go over a lot of new stuff. Maybe the only new thing was that you could try to remember the story that's both a book and a movie. But there's not a lot to review today. We just practiced what we already learned in other lessons. We do have a little homework, so let's look at that. So here we have another little practice test you could do by yourself. Um, so we have a few part one, a few part three, and part two. I'll read through these, I don't know, just to help you practice your listening or something. Part one, concentration. Is it difficult for you to stay focused on something? What do you do to help you concentrate? What may distract you when you're trying to stay focused? When do you need to be focused? Part 2, describe a time you were friendly to someone you didn't like. You should say when and where it happened, who he or she was, why you didn't like this person, and explain why you were friendly to him or her on that occasion. Part 3, why are people friendly with the person they don't like? What kinds of people are usually friendly? What are the differences between being friendly and being polite? What do you think of the people who are always straightforward? So those are stuff you could practice on your own. Look at them on your own, do them on your own. Okay, so we've gone through the whole speaking thing today. Some part 1, part 2, part 3. Next time we're going to review all we've done and all the lessons. Well, this only one more lesson for this group of IELTS speaking lessons. So next time is just reviewing everything we've learned, and then we'll be done with this. Okay, guys, thank you, and I'll see you in the last one when I see ya. All right, bye.